Free Agent Tuesday here on Birds 365. There'll be more signings today, and then Wednesday they can all become official. We're talking about what the Eagles did yesterday. You got Johnny and my take on Saquon Barkley. We're going to ask Les Bowen about Saquon Barkley too, but I want to move on to the next big move the Eagles made, because in reality, the Eagles paid more for a pass rushing specialist than they did a running back. I think even John would have to agree. Saquon Barkley is going to have a bigger impact on how good the Eagles are this year than Bryce Huff will. And yet Bryce Huff got $51 million.
I don't know, but I don't know if I agree with that. Les is speaking up. Les.
All right, Les, go ahead and tell me why Bryce Huff is going to contribute more to the Eagles being a good team next year than Saquon Barkley.
Well, I just think edge rusher is a more important position overall, but I don't know. But I do like some of Bryce Huff's stats.
His pressure stats. Do you have a pros and left? I froze before. I think Howie's screwing with my Wi-Fi. So see if you can bring Les back up.
Yeah, there we go. You know, he's like 3 in that. There we are. He was top 3 in the league last year in a lot of these stats.
He was tremendous. Jack Churchill helped him out.
You were saying you were going to, Jody, you were going to say that you wanted to make a historical comparison. I'm going to bet that historical comparison is Hugh Douglas. Perhaps.
That would be incorrect. Do you want to take another guess?
Well, I got nothing then. He was a Jets. Hugh was a Jets pass rusher the Eagles brought in and did very, very well with.
Came from the Jets, right? That there are some
maybe a little more of a. Well, no, he wasn't a 3-down guy because they took Hugh off the field and running downs a lot. But it's. I think it's something they needed to do. Whether he's as good as they think he is, we'll see. He hasn't played the snaps. They're going to have to go back to more of a rotation, I think, regardless of who stays at that position, along with Bryce Huff. I don't think he's going to play 700 snaps. I don't think the guys they had last year should have played the number of snaps they played. Part of it was the defense not being able to get off the field. But I think that's a good move. I think, he's been connected with them ever since the end of the season, really. I mean, that's the one free agent that I think a lot of people over and over again have said the Eagles were going to do. And I don't know. I don't do film breakdown of these guys or anything, but I think he's a darn good. He gets off the ball really, really well.
I'll give you the guy that he reminds me of from previous Eagles iterations. You remember the Jason Babin era, correct, Les?
Oh, yeah, very, very well. Jason Babin would get like 15, 16, 17 sacks. But
Jason Babin would have fit in well last year. Nobody on the same page. Just do what you want to do.
Well, my problem with Jason Babin was that if he was in the backfield and they handed the ball to the running back and the running back bumped into him, Jason Babin would say, "Excuse me," and let him, because that wasn't his job. And he felt, I'm not here for that. Quarterback's got the ball. I'm here,
Correct. And if you check out the newest Eagles stats, they are very similar to Jason Babin's stats.
Well, Babin was an elite pass rusher. He was just kind of a jerk, and
he's the only guy who didn't like Jason Kelce, by the way. And all the time, Jason Kelce's the only guy. He's the only guy I can find.
I don't know. I think there were a lot of things having to do. Babin and the Washburn. Washburn loved him so much he wouldn't let Brandon Graham on the field. There was a lot going on with the Jason Babin situation that I really don't think we're going to have. I don't think that's a great comp, Jody. Maybe you're right. We'll see if you are during the season.
I think it's a dead-on comp. Jason Babin had 18, count them, 18 sacks. 18. There's only 2 players in the history of the Philadelphia Eagles who had more sacks in a season. Clyde Simmons, Reggie White. That's it. He had 18 sacks. By the middle of the next year, they jettisoned his ass.
And that was the year that I figured out that sacks aren't the be-all and end-all of everything.
Yeah, they just gave Bryce Huff $51 million for sacks.
you can have a defensive line that gets a couple sacks a game, but if that's all they ever do and they don't, they're not getting consistent pressure, they're just getting those few sacks.
Well, that's why Jody and I had this argument all the time, Les. I'm a big pressure guy because pressure is consistent, and that's where Huff, I think, stood out to the Eagles.
And some of the metrics on that, like Josh Sweat supposedly had a good year with pressures. Well, is it a pressure when you're being guided past the quarterback and you sort of swipe at him a little bit? I don't know.
Yeah, it's definitely there's definitely a subjective nature to it.
But,
Chris Long talks about this a lot, and you're close to Chris.
Yes.
And I always bring up Chris because of the NFC Championship game. That was a pressure that changed that game completely. It go to the Super Bowl. Chris Jones, the 49ers are going in to potentially win the game in overtime. It was a pressure that stopped because the receiver was open. Brock Purdy just didn't have time to get him the football. That was a pressure that held him to a field goal. Then Kansas City goes down and scores.
That's a very good
games.
point, John.
Yeah,
that's an excellent point.
So many games are defined by that. Yeah,
it's hard to. It's a term that gets used for a lot of different things, but there are times when it's very, very accurate. You're right.
Yeah, and sometimes overcome it. Sometimes,
but I'm interested in what they're going to do with. There's a lot of talk about Sweat and Reddick could both be gone. That's going to be
definitely getting rid of one of them. And guess where Huff plays? He plays on the left side. He's played almost strictly on the left side. He made Jack Driscoll's life hell.
Not true. Huff went back and forth between both positions. He played both sides.
By the numbers, he lined up on the left side. And that's Hassan Reddick's side. And look, and Hassan moves occasionally. I'm not saying they don't move occasionally, but the vast majority of time, Hassan Reddick's on the left side.
Right, but
he makes $15
I think you
million.
said Huff plays on the left side. Huff plays both. Huff played both sides for the Jets. They moved him around last year. So Hassan was always on the left, but Huff showed versatility to play both sides.
But he projects on. That's what I heard. I'll double check. But he's more of a left-handed player. He's more on that side. Not that guys move around all the time. Brandon Graham plays inside, but he's a defensive end the vast majority of the time. That's where I think the Eagles are projecting him. If that's the case, it's more likely, and it makes sense from the standpoint of Hassan. Right now, he's at $15 million, but he doesn't want to play at $15 million. So he wants upwards of 20 plus, maybe 25 million. So to me, that makes the indication that he's more likely to go than Josh Sweat. Agree with that or not, Les?
Yeah. But I don't know what Sweat wants either. Similar contract situations, right? Is the Sweat?
Yeah. Well, he wants an extension. Yeah, but can he ask for as much money as Hassan Reddick?
That's a great question. He's younger, but he hasn't done as much. I thought he was worse down the stretch last year, although that's a comparison that's really moot.
Everybody was bad. It was just levels of bad. Yeah.
I'm in a weird position with Hassan Reddick. I really like the player very, very much. Unfortunately, my wife and I invested in a Hassan Reddick jersey for our oldest son's birthday last month.
You got to go throwback always.
And this has been a kiss of death for us going back decades. That kid, his first Eagles jersey was Javon Curse. He also has a Connor Barwin. I love Hassan Reddick, but if you talk about those guys that make $25 million a year, I don't see Hassan Reddick as Myles Garrett. I honestly don't. I
think that's fair. No, I don't. There's like two people on the planet.
Do you not think he's as good as Bryce Huff? Since Bryce Huff is now making more than Hassan Reddick?
Well, he's not making $25 million a year.
Hassan's making 15 and Bryce Huff is making 17.
Yeah. Well, that's fine. I mean, if they wanted to pay Hassan 20, I'd probably be all right with that. But I just don't think he's, top pay, very top. My impression is that they've offered something in the 20 range, and that hasn't been good enough. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, the Eagles would be fine with Hassan Reddick if he wanted to play on the final year of his deal at $15 million. They'd say, yeah, let's run it back.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no problem with that.
Yeah, no downside to that at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he might end up having to do that if they don't get a good trade-off. I think that's kind of something lurking in the background here that, people haven't really digested yet, is they're not going to just have a fire sale. Somebody on social media was telling me, well, the Eagles have to be fair about this. These other teams, they have to sign him to a contract, so they're not going to give that much. Why should the Eagles care?
Have to be fair about anything.
That's not the Eagles' business.
Yeah, but here's why the Eagles should care less. If you're going to say, sorry, Hassan, didn't quite get the offer that we wanted for you in a trade, and we evaluate you at $20 million, let's say. And there was a team out there, his agent knows who they are, and maybe they were going at 21 or 22, whatever the number is, it exceeds what the Eagles are putting on the table. Yeah, we're going to ask you to come back and play for your 1 year salary at $15 million. In a locker room that doesn't have Jason Kelce, in a locker room that doesn't have Fletcher Cox, in a locker room that's got a guy who's sitting squarely on the hot seat as the head coach, you want an unhappy Hassan Reddick coming in there? I think Hassan Reddick needs to be one of the leaders of this team next year. And you're going to go, hey, sorry, you signed the deal. Play for the $15 million you're supposed to. That's a recipe for disaster.
That's a solid point. I don't know how Hassan Reddick reacts in that kind of situation, but I do know that teams do this all the time. I've seen it happen. Teams ask guys to play in the final year. I wouldn't do it with my quarterback. I wouldn't have him ticked off, but at a lot of positions, it's just kind of the way the cookie crumbles. We'll see.
Yeah.
You make a good point, but I'm not ready to say, oh God, they have to do something because they can't possibly have Hassan Reddick here in the final year, not feeling good about this situation. I don't know.
Yeah.
But we're going to talk about Saquon.
Saquon, Les, I don't know how much you heard. Howie was fumbling with my internet, evidently, because I'm not a big fan of the move.
He gets Big Dom to do that. Yeah.
Jody, a bigger fan. Look, I bring up Christian McCaffrey all the time because the Eagles wanted to draft him in 2017. So there are outliers. And Howie has always said that. And they tell you with this contract, they believe Saquon Barkley is an outlier. So typically, I always laud the Eagles. Almost generally, when they make decisions, Les, I understand the decision. I might not agree with it, but I understand it. It makes sense to me. This one doesn't make sense to me. I think they misevaluated the player. Am I right or wrong?
I don't know. I share some of your concerns. 3.9 yards a carry last year. I know they had a horrible offensive line. I didn't see a lot from Saquon Barkley last year, really. I'm the guy that, like the last time I was on here, I was making fun of Giants fans thinking this was the be-all and end-all of existence, is whether they were going to get rid of Saquon Barkley. A running back, to me, I would never have drafted any running back second overall. They could have drafted Lamar Jackson in that spot. But the big piece here to the puzzle that's missing is we still haven't heard from the new offensive coordinator, Kevin Moore.
Yeah,
we don't have any idea. Maybe he feels he had Austin Eckler in San Diego or L.A. Chargers last year. Maybe this is something he said he needed. Maybe they're going to throw to the running back a lot, which Nick Sirianni hasn't done that the Eagles used to do. Saquon caught, I think, 91 passes his rookie year.
Yeah. Well, if I can get that Saquon, I'm happy with it. If I can get rookie Saquon, I'm all on board. Right. I just haven't seen that guy.
Right. I haven't either. I was very surprised that they did this. However, I will say that sometimes we sort of stake out an idea of what we think the Eagles' position is, and we overstate it. And I think I did this and other people did this with the running back thing. When I really looked at it, and somebody had to remind me of this on social media. I'm not that smart. But when they had LaShawn McCoy, They paid him at the top of the league. You know, it's not that they're not willing to pay a running back. When they had DeMarco Murray, unfortunately, they paid him at the top of the league. They just have made a decision since then to approach it from another angle. You know, but it's not like they've never had an elite running back, and they wouldn't ever pay an elite. We all kind of got a little carried away with that, I think.
Well, I think it would be, to me, the demarcation line is Howie 2.0. So when Howie came back, that's when the scale back began,
right?
Of devaluing the position. They devalue certain positions. I think it's fair to say that. Now, I've always pointed out there are outliers, because he did want to draft Christian McCaffrey, but it's going to be very rare, and it has been. Now, they drafted Miles Sanders in the second round, but they weren't willing to give him a second contract at all 1,269 yards and 4.9 yards per carry, by the way.
Yeah, they weren't willing to pay Miles Sanders. They were willing to draft Miles Sanders.
Yeah. So it's always a sliding scale. And I've heard from people that they think this player is somebody who can bust the tendency, who's that good. And that's sort of where the disconnect is with me.
Yeah,
it always comes down to evaluation.
It is going to be different, but with the offensive line, but without Jason Kelce, we don't know how different it's going to be. I mean,
it's going to be good, though.
Yeah, that's true. And maybe, you know, Saquon's a big guy. He's like 230. Maybe he takes a few of those. Maybe they don't do quite as much tush push, brotherly shove. You know, maybe they hand it to Saquon a little more on short yardage. I don't know. But they certainly could use him in the passing game to get. Well, this was my joke that I was going to use, is that they're paying all this money because blitz pickup was such a disaster.
Yes.
Saquon's really good at
the blitz. He can. Yes.
Of course, you don't pay that much money for blitz pickup, but it's something he does, and he's also a good outlet if your quarterback is under pressure, as Jalen Hurts often was last year. You can get it to Saquon, and Saquon might actually, you know, go out and get you a first down or something.
And you have to dedicate a guy to actually stay in and pass block. It's really nice if you're really good at it. But if the play is never designed for you to do it, who the hell cares how good you are if you never did? I forget which game it was last year. It was one of the games that I thought they overused Gainwell. And
week one?
After week one, it was somewhere in the middle of the season. And I said, how do you not have Swift in there for 75% of the snaps? And John said, well, that's because Gainwell's such a better blocker at picking up blitz.
I said he's better, not he's good. Okay. He's better.
So then that next week, I charted it. And Gainwell played 34 snaps, 35 snaps, whatever it was. He stayed into block one. 35 snaps. He stayed into block once. He had blitz pick up once. So who the hell cares if you're good at it if you're not actually going to put that in as part of the play? You got to stay in, even if it's just.
Well, I think a lot of things are going to change, Jody. That's why we have this offensive coordinator now. And again, not having heard from either Moore or Fangio, we're kind of flying blind here with these acquisitions. We don't really.
Yeah. You know,
I have to think that these guys have a lot to do with these priorities. You know. Neither one of them had any connection with Nick Sirianni, and they brought him in here. And
Vic was around a lot in the Super Bowl year.
That's true. That 1 year he was here. That's a good point. I'm wrong about that. But Kellen Moore, you know, has no connection to Nick Sirianni, and maybe to get him here, maybe they had to give him some promises that they would get some people that run the offense the way he expects. I don't know. I mean, we saw Nick talk at the combine like it wasn't really going to be Kellen Moore's offense after all. We don't have any idea right now what the hell they're going to do. But
hold on. Let me follow up on that. Did you buy that, or was that Nick just flexing?
Well, the previous press conference, the one where he said it's going to be the offensive coordinator's offense, he also said before that in the same press conference that it would be a melding of the two. And then he said it would be the offensive coordinator's offense. And everybody grabbed onto the second point. It's kind of like the Bible, where you can find anything you want.
Right.
You know,
Oh yeah. But I tell Jody all the time, Nick contradicts himself in the same press conference.
Yeah. So we honestly don't know yet. I mean, we have no idea. I got to think Kellen Moore doesn't come here to run Nick's offense or to try to shoehorn a few concepts into Nick's offense. But in the absence of Kellen Moore, I don't know. But one point I wanted to be sure to make here, I don't want to get you too far off on a tangent, but these things where, a lot of fans are like really excited about the Giants fans are, peeing on their Saquon Barkley jerseys.
Yeah, I saw that.
I've seen a lot of that in the NFC East where a top player goes to the other team. Yeah. And usually,
Deshaun
Jackson with the Commanders had a lot of good games against the Eagles. But, Washington got Jeremiah Trotter. That didn't work. They got Donovan McNabb. They were all excited about that. They had a big press conference, and they were like chortling about that,
So Albert Breer,
the Eagles with DeMarco Murray, that was going to be, Dallas, ha, ha, ha,
Here, Les, to your point, my cautionary and a larger point league-wide, a cautionary tale about free agency, because generally the really, really good players never get to real free agency. They get tagged or they work out a deal.
Right.
Tag as a placeholder. They rarely get there. So basically what you have is a bunch of B-level guys getting A-level money at the start, along with A-level expectations. So 2 years from now, you're going to see all these names. A bunch of them are going to get cut. They're going to get redone. They're going to get things, rework contracts, or they're just going to get moved on. So right. Albert Breer went back to 2022, and you can do this with anyone.
I saw that. Yeah.
Ravens Marcus Williams is now the only player left on the list of the top 11 at the time who hasn't taken a pay cut, been traded, or been cut. One of 11.
Yeah.
And it happens every year, and that's the reason. B-level talent getting A-level money with A-level expectations. So don't get really excited. Don't get really down. Generally, most GMs are smart enough. If it doesn't work out, they can move on quickly and go in a different direction. Now, it's really difficult. You got to build through the draft more than free agency, but free agency is very splashy.
Let me hold your feet to the fire here, Johnny Mac. Saquon Barkley, A-level talent or B-level talent? Bryce Huff, A-level talent, B-level talent?
Both B-level talent.
Yeah. I think you can make the case that Bryce Huff might be an ascending player.
Yes.
Which you can't make with Barkley. Yeah. But yeah, I agree. Yeah.
All right. Here's my Bryce, because yes, I think he will be Jason Babin part 2. A guy who will be just as good and signed for half the money is going to be a guy who was rumored to be coming here in Philadelphia. Of course, it's going to be a Vic Fangio play. Andrew Van Ginkel, who was Huff's teammate at Wisconsin. He was actually drafted in the 5th round, unlike Huff, who went undrafted. He signs for 2 years for $20 million with the Vikings, and Eagles had to go 3 years, $51 million for Huff. I'm telling you, Andrew Van Ginkel's a better football player. Why is that? Why did Huff get more money? Because an analytic says he's got a big win-pass rate? I'm sorry. I know what I watched this year. I think Van Ginkel's a better player.
Yeah. Jody, I have to think Vic Fangio disagrees with you. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I liked Van Ginkel. I thought the Eagles.
Yeah, I thought he was one of the guys we all looked at and said they might go after Van Ginkel.
Yeah.
I don't know.
He can actually, he's one of those pass rushers that can actually drop into coverage, and the whole fan base doesn't go, it's, I would have been very, very interested, but.
There was one, I will say this, since Van Ginkel's more of a pass rusher, but you mentioned dropping in coverage.
More of a pass rusher than who? Not than Huff.
No, as a player, he's more of a pass rusher
than an off-ball linebacker.
Yeah, off ball. He's listed as an outside linebacker, though. So edge player. He's an edge player.
Right.
The Eagles signed a linebacker. This was more of a typical Eagle move.
Yeah.
Zach Baum. Is that the right name? I did so much work on Barkley and Huff yesterday. I didn't even get to Zach Baum. He's a former 3rd round pick.
Yeah.
Never really splashed in the Saints, more of a special teams player. This seems like a typical Eagle move. They see something, they throw him out there and see if he can contribute as an off-ball linebacker. This to me is more in convention what the Eagles typically do. Not saying that's good or bad, because they don't seem to value linebacker.
In free agency. Howie has done real well in past years after the first wave of free agency crests, and you're getting guys for reasonable money who aren't superstars but will play a role on your team. I don't know anything about this guy. I read that he was a special teams guy in New Orleans. Obviously, they like him. Again, we haven't heard from Vic Fangio. We don't know what he likes. But
another Wisconsin guy, I think, by the way. Wisconsin.
Well,
how about that? We got Cam Jurgens and everybody.
Can we get DJ Edgewood back? If we're going to get all the Wisconsin guys, can we get DJ back?
Yeah.
How about Ron Dane? Can he come out of retirement?
Ron Dane's not a Wisconsin guy.
Cam was Nebraska,
he's a
though.
Pine Valley guy. We're taking
credit
for him down here.
Oh, that's right. Cam was Nebraska. I'm sorry. Wrong red and white Midwestern team. It's all the same to
Understandable.
me. Chicago.
Understandable. All right, Les, the Eagles did miss out on one player. They were evidently big players for Xavier McKinney. They were really trying to set Giants fans off. Packers just went to
$17 million a year.
$17 million.
Yeah.
So the Eagles clearly want a safety. Our old buddy D Gunn says CJ Gardner-Johnson might be coming back. That'll obviously be much more cost effective. They're going to add a safety at some point, right?
Yeah. That's the one thing from yesterday that I kind of took that I didn't like is a lot of safeties and linebackers signed. And those are the two positions that Eagles fans really want to see addressed. And you didn't really see, other than this Baum guy, you didn't see any of that. I was surprised. Xavier McKinney, frankly, if I were, not having the depth of information, obviously, that Howie Roseman has, but I would have made that a bigger priority than either of the guys they brought in.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I don't know that I would have paid $17 million a year for him. But that would have been a huge deal for me to get a young safety who can really play.
Good player. Yeah. Good player.
And there's a lot of guys went off the board, like we mentioned Van Ginkel, that would have helped here. And now you're looking at kind of plugging holes a little bit rather than bringing in a real. Now there was a lot of confusion last night about Patrick Queen. Apparently ESPN fell for a parody account that had him signing with the Seahawks, and he didn't. But I haven't heard that the Eagles are in on him.
He's going to be expensive, I think. Still,
but Queen. Still,
I mean, maybe he's the tendency buster.
Back, you can say,
I should learn from my mistakes. Maybe he's the tendency buster. Who knows?
Maybe it's Howie 3.0.
Yeah,
the new Howie Roseman without having to go to the other side of the building.
I like that.
Got to break your tendencies. He's a very good player. That would be really impactful for the Eagles defense. But I'll believe it when I see it.
So let me ask you this one, Les. There are, for me, 3 safeties that the Eagles should be looking at right now. They didn't get McKinney, who I thought was the best player available. Did he get paid a little bit more? Did they up the salary ceiling with safeties? Yeah, I was surprised. I thought it was going to be less than that. So I'm not going to fault the Eagles for not getting it done if they were heavily involved and the Packers just blew them away. Simmons, Curl, CJGJ. John's a fan of the Commanders kid. So we know CJGJ well, his upside, his downside, and Simmons has a tie to Vic Fangio, and for me is one of the best safeties in football. He's going to be the most expensive for sure. Curl probably somewhere between Simmons and CJGJ. If you could get him for what is fair market value, if we say that the McKinney signing was slightly above fair market value, what do you think the fair market is for the guy you want of those three? Which would you prefer the Eagles to sign?
Boy, I don't know what the fair market is there. Simmons is the best player, but he's 31 years old, or will be by the season. CJ, he had all those interceptions the year he was with the Eagles.
Yeah,
I didn't like his overall act very much at all, and I think that was manifested when he left. There's a reason why he bounces around the league like he does, even though he's a good player. I think that's a guy. You were talking about Hassan Reddick in the locker room. If Hassan's not happy, CJ on a bad team or a mediocre team or a team where there's an occasion to point fingers, I don't know. Maybe. I'd kind of rather see one of the other two guys. I like Cam Curl a lot, and I certainly like Simmons, even though he's old, and it would be a huge giving him a deal longer than a couple years would be really, really risky. I don't know that Simmons is going to blow the market away, though, at his age. I think people are pretty smart about that now,
Yeah, it's stunning. Aaron Jones just signed this morning after Green Bay cut him. I don't know if anybody saw the Packers down the stretch last season. This guy was the best running back in football. The best. He was unbelievable. Now, he was injured during the season. I think he's 29. He's going to be 30. And he got $7 million. On a 1-year deal. Clearly, it's about tread off the tire and all that kind of stuff, and people don't believe. And once you hit 30 and you're downgrade, I don't necessarily disagree with any of that. But I mean, how do you play that well down to, and everybody's like, I'm going to give this guy 12. They give Josh Jacobs, who had a terrible season, 4 years and $48 million.
Yeah.
After watching this guy run for 600 yards, and he had 3 touchdowns in the playoff game in Dallas, he destroyed the Cowboys single-handedly. Jordan Love was great, but he was sort of the key to it all. What am I missing, Les?
I don't know. That whole market is so weird. Late last night, Joe Mixon suddenly got cut.
Yeah, well, he's 30ish too. So
but it just seems like they're so fungible, which makes what the Eagles did a little even more head scratching.
Which, by the way, Eagle fans, Saquon Barkley is going to be here 2 years. I know he signed a 3-year deal. When the details come out on it, I'm almost guaranteeing you it's going to be a 2-year deal.
Or it'll be reworked if he's playing well. It'll be reworked.
Right. Yeah. There's no way he sees all 3 years of that contract. Not happening. You're right. It'll either be worked or reworked, and/or he'll be told, we're moving on to another back.
I agree with that.
It's not going to be a 3-year deal. Mark my words. Sometimes people just interpret, he's going to be there all 3 years. We got a guy on the stream that I'll bring up when we let Les go, who just doesn't get the way the National Football League and contracts work.
It doesn't work in the players' benefit, that's for sure.
No, it does not. Not you are 100%.
Unless you're Kirk Cousins.
Yeah. So last things that I know you've done these columns thousands of times in your career, Les. First day of free agency, give the Eagles a grade. A+ staff. Boy. Gotta put you to work, Professor Bowen. You got to give me a grade here on the Eagles day 1 of free agency.
I give them a B. They made 2 big moves. Neither one of them addressed a vital, lacking. The edge rusher, you kind of knew they were going to do. I give them a B. I'm not as excited about Saquon as some of the fans are. I kind of agree with John a little bit. It's a solid B. I think they got some talent. I don't think they did anything that's going to cripple their salary cap or anything, but they didn't address the biggest holes they have.
At Les Bowen, make sure you follow Les on Twitter, writing about the Eagles. You're going to write about something at Les Bowen, Sean. You got to write about Saquon. I'll be reading. So make sure you check out Les there. I'll end it here with you. And thanks for jumping on as you always do. I'm going to get Eagles fans mad on one day. And this is a snapshot and it's meaningless because this is one day of free agency, but Jody went the grade route and it's silly. But on one day in March 11th, 2024, the New York Giants got better than the Philadelphia Eagles. They got Brian Burns.
Yeah, I would have been.
They got John Runyon.
Yeah.
They got Devin Singletary to replace Barkley, who's coming off a good season in Houston.
Mm-hmm.
The New York Giants did better.
2 quick points to make, and I don't want to monopolize your time here, but I actually texted with John Runyon Sr. after that trade. John Runyon Sr.'s big free agency deal with the Eagles that was a landmark deal in 2000 and the most money anybody ever. That was for $30 million, the same as his son got, except his son got it for 3 years. Yeah. And John signed for either 5 or 6 years at $30 million. I was kidding him, hey, your kid, he got the $30 million, right? He only has to play 3 years. He thought that was pretty funny. But what was your other before that? What would you say?
I said the Giants added more than the Eagles.
Yes. Oh yeah, Brian Burns. Yeah,
Brian Burns. I'm not talking about contracts because
wouldn't you have traded Carolina those picks for Brian?
That guy can
Burns?
Play. And all of a sudden, you have Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau, who seemed to turn the corner a little bit last year.
But the Eagles have Bryce Huff, who's got a better win rate than either of those other two.
Yeah. Brian Burns is more.
I'd rather have either of those two giant pass rushers. You and I agree on that one. Yeah. Les, great stuff. Always appreciate it whenever you opt in. Thank you much.
Les.
Les Bowen's John. Check out his website. He'll be joining about Saquon Barkley. I guarantee you. Check it out later on this afternoon. He's here with us on Birds 365. All right. Thanks, Les. Jody Mack, John McMullen hanging with you on Birds 365. Hey, I want to do you guys a favor. Let me do you a solid by telling you here's your chance to save up to 40% on your car insurance and do it right now from one of JAKIB Sports' great partners. Here's what you need to do. Call one of their 2 managing general partners, either Jim or Fran, and tell them you're a friend of JAKIB Sports and Birds 365.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at Del Val Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!